Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking, everybody. Welcome back. I'm Deanna. It's great to see you as I fool around looking for my notes on tonight's great show, I hope. Those are oldies. Got my sketch stuff ready in case we do some seat of the pants, pantsy sketching. Okay, this is where we are at. There we go. Got it. Boom. Done. Happy Friday. Welcome back, everybody. It is great to see you. Linda, cheers from New Jersey. Cheers, my dears. I was just made this really lovely drink. I don't look at that invisible mint, right? That's going to be the title of my memoir, right? Oh, it just came into view. Invisible Mint. Do you see it on the side of my glass? That's a great title for in memoir about having a YouTube channel, isn't it? The green screen. Anyway, beautiful drink. Thank you so much with the invisible mint, and it's like crushed up watermelon and mint and something else. Something else that's really good. Very fresh and cool. Isn't it amazing to be able to wake up and move through the day with your body wearing clothing and not feel like you're going to keel over and expire on the spot? Is it back to normal temperatures for you? It is here. Thank you, Lord. Cheers, my dears, everybody. Happy Friday night. It's great to see you. Mom, there you are. I was just with my mom a few minutes ago. We were at our, let me fix this in a weird, I don't know if you can see, but I have on my G's Ben shirt today. Comfy times. We've been together quite a bit lately. We had our thing at the church today. There's like a hair or something on my lip. It might be a piece of wool. It's driving me crazy. Which was so nice. Let me show you a picture from there. It was a big group who showed up today. This is the Hands and Hearts Club that I host on Fridays. I made this big focaccia bread. I do have a picture of that. I mean, it's going to look like a pizza, but it was bigger than a pizza, I think. And you probably can't tell. I thought it looked amazing when I saw it, when I made it. But it really, it doesn't look as amazing as I feel it was. It was like a flower, like it was a mandala. That's what I was thinking. And it was all broken up into sections, and it's doing green screen times, but I felt it looked very nice, and it even tasted good. So that was super fun, and it was a big group there today. So I have to figure out in future if a lot of people are going to drop in. You know, it's the kind of time of the year, of life, of the world where we are, that a lot of people just want company and want to talk right now. So it's nice to drop in. We talked about all kinds of things over the course of the 2 or 3 hours we were there. Here I am with Shay on the left and Joe on the right holding her Caswell carpet cat. Thank you. It was a great group. Lots of buddies. Just not enough seats. We got to get more seats going if we're going to have this many great buddies showing up. But those are two of our rug cooking friends that you might have seen online or on Facebook who are local and are able to pop out and we do stuff together like this weekly group. You are all very welcome. I am teaching in person tomorrow in Madison, Connecticut at Madison Wool. I'm teaching a design class, so we are looking at Maud Lewis, Van Gogh, Klimt, Hilma af Klint, um, Friedensreich Hunterwasser. I feel like there's one more. In any case, it's a very full and fun Chagall. It'll be a full, very full. I don't know how I'm going to get all that done actually, but it's kind of like a best of design like, but in person. So I can kind of freestyle it and see what people are working on. There's definitely spots in that, right? So if you are interested in going, I will be at Madison tomorrow. I think it's 1 to 3, or maybe it's 1 to 4, something like that. But yeah, Madison Wool, my friend Dana owns that shop. We've gotten to be great friends since I've been teaching there. And she can set you up and register you if you would like to do that tomorrow. Great way to spend some time together. Cheryl, great to see you. Cheers, my dears. Oh, it was a perfect day. Oh, I'm so glad I see an umbrella, a barbecue, a hamburger, and a hot dog, and a cocktail with an umbrella drink. That's the best way to finish the day, an umbrella drink for sure. April, great to see you. Oh, is it raining in Illinois? Oh, no. Carol, great to see you in Northford, Connecticut. See, I got it now. Melissa, cheers, my dears. Great to see you up there in Canada. April says, I have an old handmade quilt that is in desperate need of a good wash. Would anyone know the best way to do that? I don't think throwing it in the machine is the best idea. Joe, you made it back. I'm so glad. That was Joe I just showed you in the picture. You made it back. I'm glad. Um, yeah, it is crazy. It's crazy driving on these highways. How come it's not getting better as time goes on? Why aren't we the Jetsons at this point, just flying through the air, right? That would probably pose different dangers. Karen, great to see you. That drink is so good. I can't leave it alone. Great to see you in Black Forest, Colorado with your Pinot Grigio. It sounds very sophisticated. It sounds wonderful. April, let's wait and see if people answer that. I don't know. Um, I would want to, for myself, if it was my quilt, I would be asking the same question, and I would want to see the quilt. My sort of go-to is Eucalyptus or Woolite, that kind of thing. My first choice is always spot cleaning with older stuff because I'm not fond of soaking stuff. But then again, if you get partial discoloration, let's see what everybody says who's a bit more knowledgeable about quilt cleaning than I would be with an older quilt. Let's hope that somebody answers that question and then we can share it. Did you notice that the screen behind me today is from, come on, oh, come on. Hold on, I didn't write it there, did I? I wrote it on. Does anybody remember? I said thumbnail by So Very Frankie. Was it So Very Frankie? I think it was a weird name, and I haven't quite got it yet, but I think it was So Very Frankie. Joe, I'm so glad you made it home. Catherine, great to see you. I haven't done the bear yet, but I'm hoping I can do it after the show tonight. I have not had one moment. I have not even had. Not to be crass, but toilet time. I have not even had toilet time to think and what. There's so many things that I need to do. I'm caught up on my orders, which is great. I want to work on those quilt blocks next. I'm very inspired by this segment on quilts as well, and I've got lots of ideas ruminating, lots of things I would like to do, and the next thing I'm doing is the bear paw painting. So I promise I'll have that to you very soon. It's going to be a little bit of a busy weekend for me because I'm running the show now. Tomorrow is an in-person class. Tomorrow night I go straight to my mother's because it's my sister's birthday, so we're going to go have our traditional sushi. Happy birthday to Jessica. And then I go to church on Sunday morning, and then I'm busy with trying to get the house ready for sale because the photographer's coming on Monday. If you could see this, you would laugh right now. So it's a little bit of a push to the finish line, but I think I will be. I'm hoping I can get some painting time amidst that anarchy, because painting time lately has been my relaxing time. That's been my go-to just this last week. So I'm gonna get that all done as quickly as I can. I reached out to some people this past week about quilt features for the next issue of Magpie Times magazine. Deadline for your submissions August 1st. And anything fiber, right? Can be quilts, could be rugs, could be autumn themed stuff. So it's quilt stuff and autumn stuff because it is the autumn issue. And deadline for that is August 1st. So be thinking about that. There's a bunch of great content coming in. We can always use more. If we go over our normal page count between like 80 and 100, we can go higher. We can print higher. It's not that much more for us to go higher page count, and we will keep Magpie at the same cost. So send us your great pieces for sure. Diane, great to see you. Cheers, my dears. Joy, great to see you. Happy Friday to you too. April, wasn't it in a bathtub? April, wash it in a bathtub with gentle soap. So Karen, do you mean like a textile soap, like Woolite kind of thing? Yeah, I think the same thing. I mean, that's always what we did. I mean, quilts are different, and I don't have a lot of experience with antique quilts. But I remember that when I worked in costume, and I worked at the BBC for a while in their wardrobe, when we had like a vintage or an even older item of clothing that needed to be washed, we just washed it with like whatever their equivalent was. I can't remember the brand now, but of like a Woolite in a tub, carefully washed it. If the tub was getting like dirty or whatever, we'd pull it out and start a fresh tub. But we just did things really gently and helicoptered a lot just to be sure there was nothing going wrong or anything disintegrating or anything like that. So, or anything discoloring, which it really shouldn't, But April, let us know how it goes. That would be a good little quick thing for Magpie. Just photographing the quilt now, showing it in the tub, and if it's a success, showing it after. No, I'm not giving you a project, just an idea. Dave, great to see you. There you are with your Dr. Pepper. Remember that theme song? Dr. Pepper. Do, 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 do. Do you remember who wrote the theme song, Dr. Pepper? First trivia question of the night. And masala chips. Plums on the frame. Masala chips, plums on. Oh, the plums. You're working on the plums. You are. That was a weird sentence. That got me. That sounds really good. Karen, woolite would work fine. Yeah, I think woolite's fine. Eucalan or any Eucalan product is also, yes, Melissa, of course. He wrote all the great jingles of like the 70s. He really did. I saw somebody on the news just now who looked just like a young Barry Manilow. I couldn't believe it. I can't remember his name. He was an author. He was talking about a book that he just wrote. But yeah, Barry. Okay, so let's get going with this. Let me have one more sip of this. It's getting hot in here. I didn't think I needed the fan close to me, but I can see the fan is blowing the side of the couch rather nicely, and it's not making its way back here. Is anybody in there? No. Just the phantom. I might get up and just move that. I'm going to do that real quick because that's going to make, I'm going to start to melt. You're going to see my face start dripping. All right. And if you can hear this, let me know. I don't want you to hear it, but at least if it moves the air, you know, we'll be in good shape here. All righty. So we are still, my G-Span thing did the thing. Ugh. So we are probably going to conclude, and if we don't, we'll work on it again this week. But the content I have, you know, it's not comprehensive by any means. I'm going through, and I have been since last Friday. It started only last Friday, right? This whole quilt mania that we've been going through in the best way, I hope, started on Friday. And I wanted to start it because of the upcoming Magpie Times being a Quilt Barns issue. And I thought, well, this is going to work really well. Get people thinking about quilt blocks in the way that specifically traditional quilt blocks translate to rug making, specifically rug hooking, right? So in thinking about that, we started our conversation last Friday on traditional quilt blocks, meaning we're not necessarily talking about applique quilts, although we did look at the Rose of Shannon. We're mostly looking at traditional pieced blocks and what the symbolism is. And the list of blocks that I'm pulling from is, do you remember, nps.gov, so nationalparkservice.gov, because they have a quilt trail, right, that you can go and visit, and I think a museum or at least an exhibit. And again, I'm going to shout out and say, if anybody has been to the National Park Service Quilt Trail, or you plan to go before August 1st, please let me know, because I would love to get some content or an article about that trail. I can't leave this alone. Honestly, it's so good. Anything with mint and watermelon, right? This isn't a margarita, but that works too with mint and watermelon. April, did you see that Karen said make sure that you do your agitating of the material with your hands, right? Nothing crazy, but with your hands. Yeah, no washboard action, right? Like no washboard, but yeah, just agitate it a bit so it hits all the surfaces, and it should do magic. It really should. Our products are great these days, and they are gentle for the most part. Certainly woolite. Just heard a big bang and someone yelled upstairs. I'm hoping everything's all right up there. Oh, the children on a summer night, right? Teddy had his friend sleep over last night. It was so nice. You know, let me just, I'm going to spiral just for a second and say this, because this is one of the things, Joe, that I brought up, Mom, that I brought up in when we were having our Hearts and Hands Club today at the church. I said, as a conversation starter, I said, do you all remember the welcome wagon? Do you remember the welcome wagon? I mean, honestly, I woke up in the middle of the night because the dog was sleeping right against the back of my knees, right, like a furnace. I thought he was going to kill me. I was so hot. And I woke up and I started thinking about the welcome wagon, and I don't know why. I just could picture myself standing in the driveway. And Mom, I must have been really small, because I was about to go into first grade when we made that move, right? I was in nursery school in a different town, and I was about to go into St. Luke's and be in the first grade. So I was small. I remember coming out of the house on what would later become our porch, but we hadn't built it yet. Little porch, but we hadn't built it. So right into the driveway, and the station wagon pulled up, and you know, at a super inconvenient time, as I think they always, you know, used to turn up at the worst possible time, right? Somebody in the group today said the welcome wagon turned up while my mother had her curlers on, and it was like chaotic. But yeah, welcome wagon pulls up, pulls into the driveway. I was so confused. Of course, I was little, and I went out, and I'm sure my mom was there. And if you don't know what the welcome wagon is, I don't think it's there anymore. They used to, yes, yep. They used to, you know, when someone moved into the neighborhood or into the town, they would show up and bring you sometimes like a fruit basket or like a gift basket or something like that, and lots of brochures about things that were in the town and like the civic buildings and where they were, and say, oh, you know, are you interested in this kind of club or that kind of club? And um, yeah, I mean, it was really something. But the thing about it that in my mind was so magical was that when the welcome wagon came, as a child, it occurred to me that people knew we were there. Like people knew we existed and that we had come, we showed up, and there we were. And it was an amazing thought to me that, because this is obviously decades before the internet, it was an amazing thought to me that people would know that you arrived and take time out of their day to come and greet you and give you free stuff. It really was such a thing. I wonder if any of you have had the experience of the welcome wagon, but at least around here, and maybe it was a regional thing, but it was such a nice idea. It's just the kind of thing that I would love to see happen again, right? People just being thoughtful and being there for their neighbors. Judy says, rather than trying to lift the wet quilt out of the water, drain the tub and refill to rinse as many times as necessary. After you drain it a final time, gather it up carefully to support the fabric. That's great, Judy. I love how you always give like really precise and clear directions. Even with quilt, like describing the making of a quilt block, you're really good at that, and I really appreciate it, because sometimes my brain, like, you know, when you don't say exactly the right words in the right order, my brain's like, that never happens with you. You're really clear. You're very good at explaining stuff. I can totally picture that. So I put together this list of different quilt blocks that have some sort of romance to them, some lore, a bit of storytelling, right? And if you're just joining us, or you haven't been here for the past episodes that have been about quilt blocks, we've been talking about what these older blocks look like, what variations on the older blocks look like, and in some cases how they can be used for rug hooking or rug making designs, right? Borders, that's the low-hanging fruit, right? But some of them are great as full rug designs or geometric designs, and we're seeing a lot of variety and versions of these old blocks that are extraordinary and interesting and have this wonderful backbone in history. And they're symbolic, right? On top of all that, they're symbolic. Joe says, I grew up on Long Island. We had the welcome wagon in the 1950s. Such a nice thing. God, if I hadn't thought of it last night in the middle of the night, I don't know if I ever would have thought of it again. So strange. All right, let me come back down here. Let's see where we left off with our last block. So here's So Very Frankie. That's what's behind me tonight. So that is an Etsy shop. And we talked about this as our last slide. This is a combination of, and now we are speaking the language of quilts, right? Where, if you remember from the last episode, this is a combination of Flying Goose, which we talked about quite a bit, all the triangle designs. We're going to return to that as we conclude this episode tonight. Flying Goose along with Sawtooth, which is also known as, I'll let you fill that in. I'll look for your answer. Sawtooth is also known as, oh, so there were a few more variations of flying geese or wild goose chase, right? As soon as we get they're triangles. Wild goose chase is where we see like a track. Oh, Goretti, great to see you. Happy Friday. When you see a track of them that is a repeat, particularly if they're in different configurations, I think we saw this one on Wednesday, they can be called wild goose chase. So still sticking with the geese, right? Just changing the patterning of the, I'm sorry, this image was from, start off on the right foot, Rose Hip Needlework. That's an Etsy shop. And this image that we're looking at now is by a website called Quilts by Jen. This is another one that has the same triangle pattern. I feel like this one has another name, but I'm going to come back to it at the end of the episode. You'll see what I mean. This is the one I was using behind me as my backdrop on Wednesday's show. This is an image from quilting.about.com, and it's just reminding us with a simple pattern like the flying geese, the repeat of the triangles, right? Each triangle is like, you look up, there's a goose flying by, flying south, flying somewhere, and it's like a stylized triangle, right? Because most of the names of these quilts and the origins of these quilts are coming from people who are in the 19th century moving west. And in moving west, without maps, without their phones, looking at the stars, right, following rivers and guides and scouts, and experiencing a lot of hardship and danger, they are very close to nature, and their imaginations and creativity is still alive. They're coming up with patterns that really reflect and speak to the experience that they're having in making this, monumental, dangerous trip. Another variation, again, this is susiesquilts.com. And while this looks like it is an all triangle variation, but look at it compared to this one. Look at the shapes. Look at, I'm going to give you a clue and say, look at the pinwheel in the center of this, right? We talked about the pinwheel quilt block on one of the first shows, maybe last Friday. So you see the pinwheel, it's in negative, it's in white. See the pinwheel there. Oops, sorry, accidentally deleting that slide, let's not. And do you see the pinwheel here? It's also in white here. But you can, if you're looking at the more dominant color, then you're seeing it in the red color. So this looks a lot like some blocks we've already looked at, but it is an all triangle block, right? And it is the same as this block in design, right? It's just two of each goose going in north, east, south, west, right? But you can see when you pop things in different colors, the block looks completely different, and that's the fun of fooling around with your gridded paper and your colored pencils, is you can lay out some of these shapes and do different color plans for them, and you end up with something different. What's to stop you? This image is from Simple Simon and Company. What's to stop you from doing any of these very basic quilt designs as a rug hanging or a floor rug? Great as a floor rug, right? I mean, look at this. I know white, right? Maybe you're a take off your shoes house. I would love to be a take off your shoes house. But interesting to think about just simply, we have a lot of geometrics in rug hooking, and they are historic and they are special and they are part of our history. But looking at these quilt designs, there has always been a lot of crossover between quilt patterns, quilt motifs, and rug hooking motifs, right? Because people were doing both. And for that reason, any of the designs that we've been looking at will make great rug patterns. Now, this is, I would say Judy will know better than me, but I would assume this is 4 blocks, and I would assume that each block is made up of 3 rows where it's like a wild goose chase strip, except in each one there's one less goose. You see what I mean? So you get a negative corner to each of the 4 blocks because you're leaving off sort of in descending or ascending fashion a goose each time. That sounded crazy, but you can see what I mean by looking at it. It's a great composition. What a lot of fun. It starts with a pinwheel. That's another great name for a book, isn't it? It starts with a pinwheel. And this is a great way, if I were more of a quilter these days, to use up scraps of material. So many of the blocks that we are looking at on this series of programs are about using up scraps, right? And that really resonates for us as rug hookers, because our craft started with using up scraps too, right? Using every little bit, whether it's cotton or silk or wool or whatever. If it can hook, if you can pull up a loop and it'll stay put, it's something that you can use, right? And quilting historically is the same. These are both scrap crafts. These are both known as poverty crafts. So quilting has gone very far, just as rug hooking has gone very far. And quilting, as you know, I mean, there's not many rug hooking stores compared to quilt stores yet. Um, but you know, if you've been into a quilt store, it's similarities, expensive materials, expensive tools and supplies, almost like a fashion for things, different patterns, different designers, right? Making things even more expensive. It becomes its own language. The expense aside, if you are a quilter, you probably are moved and inspired by um, just the practice of walking into a quilt store and saying, oh, this is all of the tilde stuff. Look at that. This is all the cave stuff over here. Look at that. And oh, look at this is a new thing. Oh, who's this designer? Yes, it's expensive. But if you love it, it is fun. And it is fun. I mean, I would rather be on top of the quilt scene and know what the next latest tilde line is than be on top of the fashion scene. It's just preference, right? I've never been a fashion. Hello, I've never been a fashion person, but the quilt, the quilt scene is even more sort of timely and has a vogue to it much more than our rug hooking world does, right? Our rug hooking world is even more thrifty, and I do love that about hooking. It's even more like, since we're not using new prints or anything like that, we're not waiting for the next collection. Hopefully you are waiting for the next ribbon candy hooking thing, and lately it's been the ribbon candy Paintbox painted patterns, and the new color sets, like the Preppy Pride set is out this month for June. Hopefully you're looking forward to things like that, but it doesn't work exactly the same way, does it, as seeing like a quilt designer's, a textile designer's new line, right? That works a little bit differently, and there is a price tag associated with that, but that is part of the fun, and you buy into that, the sort of lore of quilting, for lack of a better word, when you get involved in quilt making and you find yourself wandering around these stores like a zombie, calculating how much everything costs, and then totaling it up in your head and thinking, how much is that one quilt going to cost? Same thing for rug making, isn't it? Right? I think to a lesser scale, because at least it's apples and oranges, right? It's definitely apples and oranges, but at least with rug making, you can say, like my friend Mandy was finishing one of the pieces for the Mystic Rug book, and she ran out of a green color at the top, and she just mixed black or navy with it, and she said, I ran out of that color. I'm sure you noticed. And I looked at it again and said, actually, I didn't notice, right? The thing is so fine. It's so fancy and fine. It's one of Mandy Cornish's pieces. It's perfect. But when she said it, I noticed, but it didn't bother me because as a rug hooker, my eye is used to seeing substitutions, because we often run out of the very color and you've got to move to something else. It's a little different with quilting. It seems to be much more intentional with quilting. If you run out of the material you're using, it becomes a very different kind of a quilt, right? When you just, more of a thrift quilt or a scrap quilt, when you just put any sort of substitutes in. So apples and oranges, but so many crossovers and similarities in the way that we work, in the way that we shop, and in the way we think about completing our block. This is your next trivia question, and the answer to the other thing I didn't see anybody write, but what is like a sawtooth block? It's an eight point block, right? An 8-pointed block. Karen says of these pieces, hooking those points would be a challenge, but by the time you're done, you'd be a real pro. Yeah, yeah, and and Judy's really good at coming back to us with this, but it is chronology too with quilting, isn't it? I mean, I think there are some quilts, and I don't know enough to say, but I think like New York Beauties and Compass quilts, Compass Rose quilts, those kinds of quilts, they come down, it boils down to it's fiddly. When you get to tips and points and stuff, it's all about matching and it's fiddly. Whereas lots of the simpler triangles, I think it's more about chronology and doing the pieces in order so that you don't get a fiddly connect when it is time to connect. The more elaborate your quilt pattern is, the larger chance you are going to have to do fiddle-dee-diddle-dee-dees. And it really depends on if you have the stomach for that, right? And that has crossover to us too as rug hookers. That's how I feel about working with 2s and 3s, is fiddle-dee-diddle-dee-dee. And I know some of you would prefer to, because you're thinking as you go, well, I can get a lot more detail that way, so I would prefer that, right? It's like using a fine tipped Sharpie to do a drawing as opposed to one of the chisel tips, right? I go for the chisel tip, but I get why a person would want to use the fine as well. Joe says another name for the sawtooth is variable star. Okay, great. Thank you, Joe. Joe is a quilter too. We were talking about that a little bit today too. So your next trivia question. Now this is not a very well-known block. What do you think this block is called? Do you think it is called buttons and bows, corn and beans, or fox and hare? I'm going to take a sip. I'm not going to sing that song anymore. They're going to attach to this video. Jeopardy is. You think about that. Buttons and bows, corn and beans, or fox and hare while I take a sip of the watermelon and mint. That's not one of the choices. So, because I know there's a delay, I'm going to keep going. The answer is this quilt, and incidentally, this image is from the site that I was using as the backbone to this text, nps.gov, nationalparkservice.gov. This quilt is corn and beans. Where's the corn? Where's the beans? I don't know. Karen, good guess. I mean, this is an impossible one, and I'm glad that I tricked you. I'm sorry to say, because it means that the choices were good, and I'm doing my job over here. So corn and beans. Quilt patterns reflected our country's agricultural society and the family's dependence on the crops they harvested, the fruit and vegetables they grew, and the foods they preserved. Up until 1920, most people lived on farms. Only 2% of the population, resided in towns or cities. A quilt pattern that reflects this agricultural influence is corn and beans, both of which were essential to the homesteaders. Quilting allowed women to escape from hard work, rigors, and drabness of their everyday routines. With 7 or 8 women gathered around a quilt frame, a quilting bee offered an excellent way to socialize. The quilting bee was such a popular event that Stephen Foster, one of America's beloved songwriters, wrote a song about it. And I don't know the song, but in the text it says, "In the sky, the bright stars glittered, on the banks, the pale moon shone, and was from Aunt Dinah's quilting party, I was seeing Nellie home." Aww. Yep. Well, of course, this one, yes, the colors for sure, the yellow and green. So this is very literal, but of course this can be done in any color combo. So let's look at some of the other color combos. This is still a pretty well-known block. This is a tutorial on how to do it. This comes from Carol Thalen, Thelan. And this is a tutorial that's available online. I don't think it's a video. I think it's a photo tutorial. So she's showing you in this how to do the corn and beans. Weird. Because you can see when you look at the breakdown of it, these are not complicated pieces. We don't have curves, right? This is all about chronology. There are some triangle pieces. There are a lot of triangle pieces, but you can see it's not difficult. It's just going to be matchy-matchy when you're putting your triangle pieces together. That's all. And once you start sewing triangles, right, to like a square that's split into halves into 2 triangles, you get used to how to lay them perfectly so that they open up to make a perfect square. At the beginning, everybody has to seam rip a million times because you have it shifted over to the left or a little bit to the right, and it's not going to lay right. There's not enough of a seam allowance for it to meet up with the other pieces you need to attach to. But you do get there in the end. You just have to give yourself a little bit of grace and say, all right, I got it. I gotcha. If I don't get you this time, I'll probably get you next time, but if I screw it up again, it's going to be soon, right? My eye is going to soon be able to tell how to sew this thing so that the square comes out perfectly matched. Now, this would have been a dead giveaway if I showed you this one, still corn and beans. And it's helping it along, right? Seeing the Indian corn as a print. This is way more limited in terms of color. This is Starbuck Whale Rider, right? That's the website or the blog that showed me this piece. Starbuck Whale Rider. I love that. I love that. Starbuck was one of the most famous surnames on Nantucket off Cape Cod. And certainly they were whalers, so I'm thinking this is referring to one of the early Starbucks, but great name, Starbuck Whale Rider. Great name. very smart handle, right? And okay, so um, corn and beans, corn and beans. So it was, one more time, let's look at corn and beans before I move on. Let's look at one of the ones that's easier. Sorry, you're going to be guessing on that before I get there, right? What am I doing? What am I doing? Hang on, I'm trying not to show this to you, and I'm making a pig's breakfast of it here. Let's go one more time back to, let's do Carol Phelan. One more time, so you can see when you attach 4 corn and beans together, it does really look like a traditional row cooking pattern. It's I don't know personally why this is called corn and beans, because it has a very prominent bow tie in the center. I know the bow tie is a different block. When you put it together, to me, it doesn't look any more like corn and beans. Um, Carol says there are ways to make half square triangles, also 1/4 inch seam. Well, that is good to know. I know I've done that by hand when I first started and I didn't have a machine. I first started quilting. And I don't mind the small margins as long as I know that it's all, that I'm going to make them all consistent and that they're all going to be able to go together in the end. For me as a beginner quilter, that was always the thing. So this is a funny block. I have to say it's not one of my favorite blocks, um, just because the others, no matter how abstract they are, the names of the others that we've covered so far, um, you really can say, okay, yeah, I see that, right? That is a flying goose. But yeah, this one confuses me a lot, I guess, the corn and the beans. It almost makes me think, was there some kind of a feed sack or a label or something that this is coming from? In any case, it's a beautiful block. Um, in my head, I have to rename it like um, magician's bow tie or something like that, because yeah, it's the name of it is great, but I just don't get it. I feel like the corn there should be lots of small pieces or something like that. Maybe not. What kind of bean would be a triangle? You know what I mean? I can see all the little, like, this has got so many triangles, and I'm gonna stop. I'm being too literal, right? But come on, it's not a corn cob and it's not a corn niblet, right? Like an individual kernel. Where the heck are the corn and the beans? We are corn and beans. Maybe. Oh, okay, April. Interesting. Interesting. So you're saying maybe it reflects the region rather than the literal design on the quilt block. You know, that's really clever because we have some coming up in the show tonight that are specifically like Nebraska themed. So that's really interesting. I bet you're absolutely right about that. It makes more sense that way. Thank you. Thank you. That is an excellent perspective. That makes way more sense. So this could be a regional block. I do want to read more about um, quilts and the history of the names, and I would love to have stories like that at the tip of my tongue. You know, I only have so many for each of these shows, but thank you, April. I think you're absolutely right. So I know you all know this one, but play along. This is one of the most famous quilt blocks. This is one of my favorites too. I just love the possibilities with this design. Is this open window, churn dash, or barn raising? And I know that you know. I love the colors on this example as well. This is such a nice early block. So simple, right? Something that, we were saying in past episodes that some women were very, very new to it. Girls would be expected to have done X amount of quilts, right, for their futures before they were a certain age, certainly the age to marry. Carol, of course, you are right. It is Churn Dash. And this is one of the most famous. I mean, it's right there in the top 3 without a doubt. And it's just such a signature shape. I would love to see a rug hooker use this Churn Dash as a motif. And in any way, it's just, yeah, it's such a signature shape. So Churn Dash, and again, I'm using, Karen says the pattern's name is specifically tied to the use of yellow and green fabrics. Okay, Karen, great. Did you just, that's what you were saying before. Oh, I thought you meant just that one example. So Karen's saying of that pattern, the corn and beans, let me come back to you so we don't confuse it with Churn Dash. Of the corn and beans, you're saying That pattern is specifically tied to the use of yellow and green fabrics. It was first published by the Ladies Art Company between 1890 and 1906. Excellent. I know this. I think I know the site you're on because it's very heavy, ladies, the LAC. And I'm pulling from that later in this episode. That is an excellent site as well. Excellent. Thank you so much. I didn't look up corn and beans there because I was already doing the MPS site. Fantastic. So that makes sense too. Using the yellows and the greens. See, there's so many ideas or origins of the names of these blocks. It's just fun to know, isn't it? It's fun to speculate and it's fun to know. So Churn Dash, the homesteader's life and their daily activities contributed names to many quilt blocks. 19th century quilts reflect what women saw around them and what was important in their lives, such as a churn, a common household item. A quilt historian says that quilts had characteristics so localized that they could be classified geographically almost as easily as the Yankee twang or the Southern drawl. But as the homesteaders traveled west, blending together on the trail and in their new territories, the patterns became intermingled and renamed. The Churn Dash pattern, for example, has 21 different variations and names. But whatever the name, one can be certain it was meaningful to the maker, for even the simplest quilt represented a considerable investment of time and energy. And when the cold winter winds blew snow through the chinked cracks of the log cabin, oh my God, the quilt was a welcome cover, whatever its name. True. That part is true. So that is, hold on, let me get organized. Churn Dash, hang on. Okay, that's a blank page. So let's look at some more. Let's look at some more variations of Churn Dash. Because while it is one of the most common, you can see there's a lot of directions you can go with it, right? You don't have to stick with the basic color plan. This is a by the way, I did it again. This image was from Epida Studio, EPIDA. And this image is from Blue Susan Makes. Blue Susan Makes. Just say, I don't typically like contemporary fabrics, but I love this set. This is absolutely gorgeous. Blue Susan Makes. So you can see how the Churn and Dash works, right, with the triangles on the edges and then the rectangles. But in the Blue Susan Makes version here, there are some more color substitutions. So those, take that white, take the negative white churn and dash motif away with your eyes, right? It's just a blank. And you look at what's left, you've got the center square, but of course you can break the center square up into 4 triangles and it's still a center square. And of course behind or to the sides of the rectangles, you can add the different color fabrics. When you fill in the colors this way, you end up having 4 rectangles behind the churn and dash. I mean, very, very smart thinking. Very cool color planning, and it becomes an even more interlocking. This pattern is kind of stands alone, right? The geometry of it stands alone from block to block. As soon as you add those triangles behind it, you're now talking about a pattern that when you block it up with the other blocks, when you connect everything together, you're going to have a second pattern because of the way those blocks land. If you want the gray to land with the gray, then you have a tipped square, right? Or the black with the black, a tipped black square. So interesting that can, if you're thinking, ooh, what a layer of difficulty, not really. I mean, if you look at it and you think about it, not really. You're, with the exception of the center block with the 4 triangles. Lillian, great to see you. Hello and welcome. With the exception of the corner block and then, the center block, then the corners, right, would be solo triangles, but they're split in half. So you make the 4 corners 2 triangles instead. It's not mind-bogglingly complex to get such an amazing result, you know? Interesting. Think about how this block would look, right? Do imagination time. Keep the Churn and Dash motif white. Keep the 4 triangles in the back different, and think about what if you had 4 different colors of rug wool, right? And even if they were patterned, say one of them was kind of a hand-painted pink, one of them was a hand-painted orange, one of them was a solid black and a solid gray, you could do the same thing. How cool would that look? That would make a tremendous rug, punched or hooked or tufted or rhea or anything, to match a quilt, right, that you've got on the bed, or something for the wall. I mean, you can really play with color with these early, especially with these early quilt blocks, because of the simplicity. And because we're not sewing, it's very easy for us to put 4 colors into the center, right? To just draw with a Sharpie those 2 lines and turn it into 4 triangles. It's easy for us to hook that and just say, oh, change in color now, right? So something to think about. Just some of these variations show us a geometry that is unexpected. I'm sorry, this slide is so dark. It's the picture is dark. I should have lightened it up. This image comes from a website called Generations Quilt Patterns. Generations Quilt, but you can see it right on the bottom there. Another beautiful example of a churn and dash that I think is Brandon, what's his name, Mabley or something, or K-Facet fabric that is making the motif itself, not the, I don't know who the blue and white polka dot is. I guess it could be anybody, right? But I recognize that sort of leaf pattern because I had that at one point. Beautiful. So real organic feel to it, along with a very sort of graphic polka dot known pattern. And the color choices in this specific block are interesting because we've got the warm colors of nature with the leaves, like a close-up of the leaves, and then in the background, very cool, icy blue and white. So interesting. Color palette is really interesting. It creates tremendous contrast. You know, sometimes as a quilter, I used to think, I wonder if using a pattern with a pattern, I'm going to get enough contrast, or if I'm going to be disappointed. Well, when you look at colors like this, you might think, oh, is it going to be confusing because there's 2 different patterns? Not at all, because the colors are so different, right? The pink is so dark, unexpected, right? And the blue is so light. So it works really well. This is another example by MSP Designs, and that is an Etsy store. So this is a wobbly, a tipped, a wonky, whatever you want to call it, variation on the churn and dash. And all it is the corners are the same, right? So that's very structured, that's the same. But you can see the rectangles that connect the 4 corners are like trapezoids, right? Instead of being just rectangles. So interesting. That is fun, isn't it? Because then it becomes a great contender or a great vehicle for an I Spy quilt for a little one. Or if you have a great collection of pictorial fabrics, like I have a lot of Halloween fabrics, what if you choose exactly what goes into the window of that churn and dash, you've got a very charming quilt pattern. But the fact of it being a bit wonky, right, a variation, makes it a bit more casual, doesn't it? A little more humor, a little more, a little less formal. So interesting, right? And this is an example of the churn and dash done very traditionally, but in contemporary colors. This is Susie Quilts, and on a white background, lots of spacing between them. In this case, we've got several things going on. Rita, great to see you. We've got several things going on that I think are working great. First of all, I think the super white, we're not talking about like French vanilla. We're talking about really, really white, like a blue white. With that fine black border, very graphic and contemporary. The colors are interesting. For the most part, they look like a small print, not a calico, but like a very subtle print, mostly monochromatic, and very bold, very different colors in an unusual contemporary color palette. Interesting. The fact that they are separated from each other, they're not butted up against each other, gives us a lot of white background, and that makes it it gives you great opportunity to be able to quilt the hell out of it, right? So that you look at it and you go, wow, look at that quilting. Isn't that fine? Isn't that well done? And it is. And last point with this quilt, just like the wonky churn and dash with the Halloween witch, this one in each center, there is a picture of what looks like a Boston Terrier puppy, I think, or a French bulldog, one of those. They're tiny on my screen, but little cutie patooties you can see pop up in each one. What a great gift for someone who has this dog, right? I mean, what a great piece of wall art. Who wouldn't want this? Really, really clever and a great color palette. And I think that brings us to our next. It does bring us to our next. So you take a sip. Cheers, my dears. Let me take a sip of this, and then we're going to do a trivia question here. Hey, Gail. Good morning over there on the other side of the world. Happy coffee time to you. Great to see you. Happy summer. Oh, sorry. Happy winter. What am I saying? So this one we're looking at here. What quilt block is this? Here comes the multiple choice. What quilt block is this? Is this Wibble Wobble? Is this Drunkard's Path? Or is this Tipsy Topsy? Yes, yes. This is another classic. This is a really unusual, optically challenging, well done, nice old block. And if you look at all of the individual squares, it is a curved block, right? So you do have to do a curve, but you got to put your big girl pants on or your big boy pants on and do the curve, right? And I've done curves on machines. I've done curves by hand. It's not the end of the world. It is possible. Just take some practice, right? So, yep, you all are great. It is Drunkard's Path. You can see that each little block that makes up the 16 block, single block, is two pieces, and it's the same two pieces. It's the curve with the negative space, and it just becomes a question of how do you finish it? Are they half and half? Let's see. So the blue corner piece occurs in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they are half and half. They reverse. Half are reversed with the light corner piece, and the other half with the dark. And then it becomes a question of, good job, everybody. Lillian, good job right out of the gate. It becomes a question of configuration. If you configure those 16 pieces to make this design, then you have got a traditional Drunkard's Path. Now, nationalparkservice.gov says of Drunkard's Path, it is easy to imagine the origin of this name. The meandering diagonals resemble a drunkard's staggering walk. Sewing for a cause is an old tradition. Women made quilts to raise money and consciousness, both to promote the abolition of slavery and to promote women's rights. Women across the country were also involved in the temperance movement. By 1907, the Women's Christian Temperance Union had 350,000 members. Prohibited from voting, the Drunkard's Path was a popular way for a woman to express her opinion on alcohol and its use. It appears that more quilts were made for this cause than any other. Interesting. So I'm reading between the lines, and I'm trying not to say anything snarky that is contemporary in a political way. I'm reading between the lines and realizing, okay, so it seems to me like women are saying, like, okay, so you're okay with getting drunk and being boozed up and then being in charge of all the decision making, and I'm not, and I'm sober, and I'm over here doing my women's work, and I don't have a voice at all. So it almost sounds to me like this block was used in instances, I don't know how many instances, as a sort of protest, right, statement. Interesting. Although other colors were used, blue and white became the temperance union colors. White for purity and blue for water, the purest beverage available. Well, I can't speak to that because I do love my cocktails, but I love this pattern, and I love the history behind it. I hadn't read that. I just cut and pasted this stuff. You can see this is not a temperance movement themed color palette. This is a beautiful autumn themed color palette. So this has got to be a computer generated image, but fooling around with how the block could look. Interesting. Still Drunkard's Path, still the same configuration. What's different here? I'm sure you can hear my chair creaking. I'm so sorry. I keep moving because my legs are always sore, and I'm going to have to change out my chair so it's not so annoying. Sorry about that. I'm getting old and creaky, and I'm making the chair creak. This is different than the last one because not just the color palette, but there are 2 extra colors in it here. And because of the 2 extra colors, and they're such warm sunset colors, it almost feels like the circles turn into suns, and the orange turns into almost like the sunset sky, and the center starts to look like a variation on a pinwheel. You see what I mean? And of course, it's not. All of that is just an optical illusion because it still is the drunkard's path. It purely is. But when it's done in more than two colors, like, right, the background color and the motif color, this one is done in four colors, right? Those two plus two, then it multiplies your possibilities, right? You get so many more choices. Now imagine it optically changes things as well. It doesn't strike you immediately as a drunkard's path. If what you want is a drunkard's path and you want people to look at it and go, God, look at that drunkard's path, this isn't the color palette for this, right? This is really testing and playing with the limits of what this pattern can do and remain a solid and traditional drunkard's path. Karen says, it also has roots in ancient history and has been found on artifacts dating back to ancient Egypt and Rome. Everything comes back to ancient Egypt and Rome, doesn't it? Seriously, it all does, doesn't it? That's interesting, Karen. Thank you. That's great to have that added info coming in through you. I really appreciate it. With this one, the whole idea of adding those colors is it's another layer of thought, because if you think about it, when you connect these blocks together, what is going to happen with the orange, right? The orange is going to touch more orange. I would wonder how that looks. I don't know the answer. I wonder how that would look. Hold for 1 second. I'm just thinking. You know, I would love to see that drawn out. I would love to see that repeat, because now you've created a situation where you've got sort of movement on the corners, like a side, like the orange piece, right, has a lot of movement. I wonder how it would look when it connects to the blocks next to it, because it is going to attach the other way, right? The circle is going to go against a solid line. It's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's just going to repeat this exact square, but I feel like there is going to be the energy of those four corners is going to be almost like live wires in every block. And I wonder I don't know how I would feel about that. By the way, that was a Pinterest image that was not attributed, right? Dead link. This is an interesting variation, because this is still the drunkard. This is from a website called guideofgreece.com. Not sure about the website. When I looked at it, I thought, I don't really know what they're doing here, if this is a legit website or what, but I still used this block and attributed it. It's not one that I'd go down the rabbit hole, because I started to get the feel that maybe it's not a legit site. But in any case, this was a great teaching slide, so I wanted to keep it. This is still a drunkard's path block that you're seeing, because every one of those blocks is this. Hold on. Oops, wait a minute. Fooling around. Let's try to come back to every one of those blocks is this. Right? All of them. So a little bit more tidy than that, right? A little bit more tidy. But they all are. It's just the configuration is different. So we're with a drunkard's path. We're looking at a 16 block, I think, to make the one block, right? 16 pieces to make the one block. And in this case, also looking at 16, but you can see that this is going to make a sort of a wave pattern or a rope pattern, because all the same individual squares are now being used, right? They are all drunkard's path. They are being used differently. They are configured differently, and we have got an entirely different pattern. Interesting. That's a take it or leave it, isn't it? It's a take it or leave it. But now put your rug hooker's cap on, right? If you're a rug hooker, put on your rug hooker's cap and think, ooh, interesting. Look at how simple this works. How could I use this, for example, for a border for one of my pieces? Just simple shapes here, right? And how you can twist and turn this one square to make it do all kinds of things. This pattern is from So Can She. That's very clever. SEW, So Can She. And this is Mod Drunkard's Path. So this was a free quilt block template that is up on that site, So Can She. And you can see she's doing very different things and experiments with the block. For example, look in the background at what look like the flower or leaf patterns. Still Drunkard's Path, right? Well, no, not necessarily, because we're seeing solid squares. Okay, so the two on the top, I do see solid squares, so that's a little bit different. The one on the bottom, right, doesn't have solid squares, so there's a negative sort of bow tie in there, but we're still looking at the same square with the curve, one mini block with the curve, and we're looking at 16 square pieces to make the finished block. This is still a Drunkard's Path. And I'm going to stop myself. It is all the pieces of a Drunkard's Path square, but it is not a Drunkard's Path square. All the pieces are there. It's like if you have all of the parts to a recipe, but maybe you do it in the wrong order, or you put them together the wrong way, even though it's all the same parts as the recipe book said, you do it wrong, and you're not going to get the same thing. This is not wrong. This is absolutely beautiful. This is clever and creative, especially the colors, right? More K-facet overdose here. I'm getting such an organic feel of leaves or snails, worms. Very organic feel, very fresh colors. It is so contemporary. It's just delicious colors. The concentration of the greens in the center and then whites everywhere else. I just think this is Spring Leaf Studios, this image, Spring Leaf Studios. That's one that I wrote down because I want to look at some more of their stuff. Very mod, Karen. It is. It's clever. And of course, there are only so many configurations. If you sit down with a block like Drunkard's Path and you say, how many things can I do? If I've only got 16 to play with, right? You even cut out 16. How many ways can I play with this? This is a great puzzle to do. If you're bored, you want to do something simple with your hands, with your imagination. How many configurations? It is finite, right? It's not infinite. And some will be more successful than others. I feel like this one is very successful. I love the original Drunkard's Path because now I love the history of it, but I've been looking at it for my whole life, so I am attached to it. Having said that, this is a very close second for me. I think it's just a remarkable square. Guess what? This is not all Drunkard's Path because you can see that there are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 13, nope, 14, 15 solid squares. Nope, 17 solid squares. You see them? The 17 solid squares. This is Pinterest, not attributed. I don't know how I feel. This is a real 70s feel for me because of the calico in the background and the small prints. I don't like the background. I'd love to see the background be a different color because I love this idea. I love this idea. And you can see just moving the squares around. This is more than a 16-piece block. This is a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 times 9. 9 times 9 is what? 80. Is it 81? Is it 81? God, I can't remember my multiplication tables. 82? Oh, something like that, right? This is a much bigger block. So there's more play, right? As soon as you give yourself, X amount more squares, you've got more possibilities. This is interesting because it's got great symmetry, right? There's two different motifs happening here, but in the red motif, they have figured out a way to do something a little bit different and create that sort of stamen, the center piece, the yellow piece. Otherwise, they are using mostly, not all, but mostly Drunkard's Path blocks with the one little curve in them. Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so coming to our next trivia question. Are you ready? Let me take a sip. No, I'll take a sip after I ask you, what is the name of this block? Is it Lost Owl? Is it Ballast Block? Or is it Anvil? What do you think? So this is a famous block as well. And again, all of these are early quilt blocks. All of these date back to Western progress, people moving out west to stake their claim, land races. Yes, Linda, this is Anvil. This is a very well-known one, and when you look at it, you go, okay, I can see the anvil, but I can also see an owl. Just saying. So this is the text that the nps.gov wrote about this specific design, Anvil. Not only did quilt patterns reflect the daily work of the women who helped to homestead the prairie, they told the story of the challenging work of the men. That's a great point, isn't it? Because the women's world of handcrafts did not include men. In fact, it was absolutely, um, I don't want to say it too strongly. It was absolutely their solid ground to get together and have some private space uh, that where men did not cross over. So it's not just that quilting was women's work. Quilting was by far almost always women's subjects as well. So the anvil is a great example of a quilt that does refer to men's work, right? Not just a man being drunk, but a man doing work, right? So it has a positive sort of connotation about it. The anvil pattern represented one of the necessary and important activities of the early settlers, blacksmithing. Other old-fashioned and basic patterns included, and these are all work-related patterns, sawtooth, which we've talked about, carpenter's wheel, compass, and monkey wrench. By 1890, catalog sales included quilt patterns. If a woman ordered her yard goods from Sears or Ward's, she could purchase any of 800 designs for just a dime, so 10 cents a design. By the early 1900s, magazines went a step beyond publishing patterns. Some had a column where readers could share their favorite patterns and new ones they had designed. Quilters were no longer restricted to only quilt patterns known in their region. From the bustling city to the lonely farmhouse, women could be making the same quilt. Oh, that gave me the shivers. Oh, God, that's such a beautiful sentiment, isn't it? So anvil is unusual for the reasons we just said. It's nice to have that beautiful piece of history too, thinking about them flipping through catalogs, right? Once you have an address, the catalog might find you, right? That whole post, the whole conversation about post, the mail, at that time is so. It will always be one of the eternal mysteries to me, right? It's the same with using the internet on your phone. I will never understand, on your watch, I will never understand the way that the mail worked so fast, faster than now, I would venture to say. So mail did find people. I mean, mail got ahead of where you were going in some cases and was waiting for you at the country store or at a camp. At a post office, if there was one, at somebody's house who was the acting postmaster, the mail would often make it to where you're going before you did. Of course, you were traveling probably in a wagon, in a group of wagons, and you had all your stuff with you, right? It's like being a turtle and traveling with your house on your back, as opposed to just being on a horse and flying by everybody. But it is interesting to think about catalogs, mail, but especially catalogs arriving from cities to people who were just out in the middle of the nowhere, haven't even set up home yet, and they're already flipping through a catalog, Ward's or Sears, that's Montgomery Ward, I think, right? Looking for patterns that might appeal to them, or looking for an idea, as we do, right? To say, well, I don't want to do that, but I do want to do something like that, right? We call that inspiration. So the anvil. Let's look at some more examples of an anvil, because I think this is a very strong pattern shape-wise, and like every block we've looked at thus far, it has possibilities. In this example, right? This example really looks like an anvil, right? It's got weight. It's dark, right? It's heavy. It looks painful to lift. It looks like it means business, right? Yeah, this one, not so much, but it's still the anvil design. And what's different? Well, the colors are different. We're seeing white and light blue here. And the center, we are noticing, can be one square, right? And if it is one square, interesting, because, again, it can be a vehicle for an I Spy quilt, a sort of cameo quilt. also known as an attic windows, where you choose the piece of fabric in the way that it falls so that it falls into that center like a frame, and then you can angle your anvil blocks in any direction you want, right? I mean, absolutely you could. So just the same exact pattern, looking very different indeed. This is quiltblockpatterns.net, this image. This image is from Ronald Pearsall, and that's a blog. Ronald's last name is Pearsall. Fabulous blog. This is one I pulled from a couple of times tonight. Again, very different. We are using white and as well as some fabrics that look sort of like 1940s fabrics, right? A little bit past Depression era fabrics, a little more of that red cheerfulness, right? In the strawberries, black strawberry small print, right? That's definitely a contemporary fabric. But really strong colors, really smart color plan, very unusual. And the way that he has broken down the pattern, he's broken it down differently, right? That square isn't in the center. It is. It is still, the space exists, but he has kind of encroached on that central square to make two larger triangles. Interesting, because essentially it looks like the same pattern, but it is broken down differently. It is broken down differently, right? I'm repeating that because it's important. And then there's more of a focus on that sort of hourglass or bow tie shape, and then the two little blue squares, right? It all looks different. And using that super fresh white, the spilled milk white, right, is very, very striking, particularly when you're using these strong colors. I normally hate blue, red, and black together, but I love the way it's looking right now. Of course, within the red, he's got that pretty soft flower fabric, and that's an interesting print in and of itself, the way the flowers are so small but so detailed and kind of orbiting in different directions, but staying in their lane. And they're detailed, but they have this berry color, like this really rich sort of indigo color inside of them. It's a very appealing fabric. The flatness of the strawberries, the simplicity of the blue with the little white flowers, very interesting. You know, one thing that we can do that quilters can't do is say, I'm gonna just, at the spur of the moment, pull this out and change this and break this one square up into 4 squares or 9 squares. We can do that easily. We just pull those loops out and hook something different. Quilters can't do that. But what quilters can do that we can't do is say, I would like to use a fabric with black, that's black with white strawberries, little ones, right? And then this red fabric with these little blueberry colored centers. And we can't exactly do that. We can hook with quilt fabric. If you hook with quilt fabric, my advice to you would be don't rip it, right? Because then it becomes very ruffly along the edges, and it just looks a bit messier unless that's the look you want. My tips for hooking with quilt fabric: if you do want to see those designs come up on your hooked piece as loops, don't rip it, cut it much wider. Think about folding it in half, and if you don't want to waste material or you don't have enough of the print, think about using a carrier, like a piece of wool or even a piece of fleece, right? Inexpensive fleece that's the same size, similar color, and just put the quilt fabric on top and hook with it like that. Then you get a big lofty loop of your quilt fabric. And if it's a small print, like the black strawberries or the red flowers, if it's a small print, you're still going to see that print. The wider, the better. And I would take this conversation a step further to say, if you're thinking to yourself, oh, I like this idea of using fleece as a carrier because it would be nice and lofty, right? And just putting a rotary cut, not ripped, but rotary cut strips on top that could be quite wide, right? They could be 1/2 inch wide easily. Put those on top, hook with those. I would say go a step further and think about rug hooking into latch hook backing as opposed to fabric backing. Because if you're using latch hook backing, you can cut even wider strips, do the same thing. You will definitely need a carrier. I recommend fleece. But if you're using latch hook backing, because the window pane openings are so much, the gauge is so much more open, so much larger, right? You can cut your fabric wider and you can see more of it. So it takes on more of the attributes of quilt prints because you're actually seeing what the print looks like, what the picture is, right? Interesting to think about. But when you hook into latch hook backing, you have to be sure, you have to hook, you have to have wide pieces because the holes are so big, right? Something to think about. Okay, so another example of Anvil, and I have to say again, this one blows my mind. This is Simply Stephanie Stuff, right? Simply Stephanie Stuff. So I think this is another blog. Beautiful, and same thing with the triangles. Same way that Ronald Pearsall did with the triangles, right? Instead of keeping the square as a square, right? Sort of eating up that center square by making the triangles larger on the side. They're the grayish green in this case. Interesting because it does change the look of the block. It definitely does. To me, it starts looking more like a Native American design or motif when I see it done like this without the square center. There's just more pieces. It's a little bit more intricate, you know. So we saw the anvil done all in one fabric, the original one, right? A black and white print on black. And then we've seen different configurations of it since in the subsequent slides. And just a reminder that there's so many ways that you can do this, and making it that much more difficult, tricky, challenging, and fun for us to look at quilt blocks together and say, God, I don't know what that one is. And then 5 seconds later you go, oh, yes, I got it. It's just been done differently, right? And then the question ensues, so is it the same block or not? And that becomes sort of an academic question, because it's like, well, it's the same pieces, but they have made some fundamental changes, like they've added stuff or taken stuff out, right? And then it does become, is it the same block? And does this block have another name? Linda says, I see a bird taking off to the right corner. Oh, I see what you mean. Love these materials. Yep, I see what you mean. If it had, if it didn't, oh my God, wait a minute. If it didn't have northeast, if it didn't have the two colored prints and it was just like the square, it would almost be like the purple bird with a colorful tail and then the wings. It's bordering on a butterfly too. Now that you said that, my eye is like pulling out butterflies. Interesting. So many directions you can go with all of these designs. They are such a lot of fun. This is old school. This is the solid anvil, right? No fooling around with triangles versus square in the center. No fooling around. Just the straight up anvil. Some of them dark against light, some of them the negative. And these do look like feed sack materials. This looks like Depression era fabric. This looks like a vintage quilt. This was found on Pinterest with no attribution, so I can't tell you for sure, but it could be a reproduction print. It could be an original piece. Absolutely beautiful, but it does definitely look different when the quilt blocks are this solid. And isn't it kind of an irony in this case that we're seeing very solid anvils, but they're done in such light-hearted colors, right? There is some drama there. You're expecting to see the anvil, but instead you're seeing these beautiful Depression era colors, these light brights, pastels, right? Ice cream colors. Interesting. And wait a minute, I'm confused. What are we looking at here? Are we still looking at the anvil? We can't be looking at the anvil. No, we can't be looking at the anvil. I must have screwed something up. I'm staring at it now. Hang on. I'm staring at it. We are looking at the anvil. Oh my God, we are looking at the anvil. Every other one is tipped. So the blue is the anvil. So look at the blue. If you're having the same problem I was having, they've been tipped, every other one. So it's making a lattice. It's making diagonals. Okay. Because I'm thinking, why did I put this light in there? I put it in because it's an anvil. Interesting. Oh, Karen said there were separate waiting rooms at train stations because men could be unruly because of their drinking. Yeah. I mean, God, I just picture those crazy days, right? Men behaving badly. I mean, certainly women have behaved badly through the years too, very badly in some cases. I'm guilty of much of that. But certainly the stereotype of a man at this time in history being unruly and drinking, and I think just the I mean, I'm not going to do social commentary, but just the stress of the time period, right? I mean, if we're talking about the westward expansion, the stress of that being, can you imagine being the person who the entire family was counting on to find the best situation in terms of like a town that was safe to live in, that had good drinking water, that had food possibilities, that maybe had some connection to a country store or a traveling peddlers who might come through, who had operational post, right? I mean, there must have been a tremendous amount of stress on men specifically, and I'm not being sexist, because they were the heads of the family at that time. You didn't see women participating in land races, right? And land races are where they would line I know you know this, but I'll just say it in case. They line you up at a starting point, and then they fire a gun, and when they do, you've got your flag, and you run across the field as far as you want, and where you stake that flag, that is your land. So, I mean, talk about supermarket sweep, right? People losing their minds. The amount of stress, I can't imagine. And of course, the stress for me as a woman, the stress for the women for me is like incalculable. You know what I'm trying to say? This has no alcohol in it, by the way. Just the idea of going somewhere without your family, never knowing if you're seeing them again, not having maybe all of your stuff with you, not knowing if you're safe, right? I mean, talk about losing everything. I suppose some women are different than me and are more adventurous and thought, yes, on to the next, right? But God, what a rough time. Okay, Anvil. So this is a good example of how once you tip the block around, you know, you have got a completely different looking quilt. And this is the beauty of the quilt. Once you've got all your blocks, it is up to you how you want to position them. If you want to have a repeat design like this, or if you want something more like, wait a minute, why is it doing this to me? Hang on, nope, this. Because it's all the same blocks, right? But this is a little bit different because it's more than two colors. But you see what I mean? All of these anvils are going in the same direction, where in this case they're not. So lots of decisions to be made once you have your blocks. This is another example from katiequilts.net that shows you, again, a simple and traditional anvil block, all going in the same direction, but the prestige of this quilt really is all of the different colors. Oh, I just love these colors. I really love, this appeals to the rug hooker in me. I really love how I think 3 or 4 of the blocks, the background is a little bit darker. Do you see what I mean? That's what I love about rug hooking. I like to see that in quilting too. It's like, did you run out of that vanilla color or what? Because it is fun to see a few blocks that really stand out. One of these kids is doing his own thing, right? There they are. You can see them, I'm sure, with your eye too. But color palette really including the dusty rose, the different blues, some browny blacks, and this paprika. The paprika is the dusty rose, this leafy green, right? It's a very unusual color palette. It's a very contemporary color palette. However, this looks like a super traditional quilt. I would guess this is a 1980s quilt because of the brown border, right? We saw a lot of brown borders in the 70s. They slipped away as we got into the middle of the 80s, but the brown border suits this piece really well, and keeps that historical vibe to it, right? Now moving on to our next design. I know you all know what this is, but I'm still going to ask you, do you think that this famous early pattern, right, early 20th century pattern, is called Delft Plate, Dresden Plate, or Compass Rose? I'm going to hit the mint again. And I will tell you because of the display, because of the, yes, April. What am I saying? The lag. What word am I going for that has a delay? Because of the delay. Yep, this is Dresden Plate. Well done, everybody. During the 1920s and 30s, Dresden, which is a town in Germany, produced porcelain plates that were decorated with very elaborate designs that were of flowers and fruits. And these plates became the inspiration for this block, the Dresden Plate quilt block. So, NPS, to create the block, the petal-shaped wedges of the design are pieced together, and the completed plate is then appliqued to a square block of fabric. So if you're thinking, how are you going to get this sewn on? That is so fiddly. It is appliqued on, meaning it's stitched on So when you see these in stores, when you see Dresden Plate quilt blocks in stores, and you're thinking, how the hell am I going to get this into a block? That's way too much fiddly sewing for me. You don't have to fiddly sew. It's an applique block. So, and also the circle on the center, right? Boom, sew it right on there. So, because I always see Dresden Plates in shops. I also see the wedding ring shapes, and I think, no thank you, but Dresden Plates I usually pick up because I know I might be able to do this. Karen, you're right, this one is fun to do with ties. There is a book, there are 2 books on quilting with silk neckties. One of them is called My Father's or My Daddy's Ties, I think My Father's Ties, and she's got a lot of pillows and full-size quilts that are done with her father's neckties. So yeah, that would be super, super fun. And it would work great, wouldn't it? It would work so perfectly. So little cutting to do too. You wouldn't even have to disassemble the tie, right? I mean, maybe take um, the stuffing out of it. What's that called? Like the interfacing part out of it. But otherwise, I don't think you would have to de-engineer the sewing and the folds on the tie. Remember, ties can be slightly different sizes, so you want to be careful if you are going to do this project. Just be careful because they are different widths too. So I think the only thing that matters is that you have balance and you can complete the circle. I think that's the only thing that matters. So many refer to quilts made during this era as feed sack quilts because quilts were made by recycling the sacks that had been used for holding grain and seed. Women saved and traded feed sacks to get the colors and patterns they wanted. Often, they would send a scrap of a specific feed sack with their menfolk when they went into town to make certain that they returned with the desired pattern and color. That's interesting. I've never heard that before. I always wondered if it was like, you get what you get and you don't get upset, or if you could actually ever hope to see the same design twice. I never knew that. Before printed patterns, quilters would sew a block together as a way to give each other the pattern. Oh, that's so nice. Later, sample blocks in cotton or silk could be ordered from catalogs. Sample blocks could be ordered from catalogs. That's interesting. I wonder if we tried to look at a sample block today, whether, for example, an eBay seller would know that they had a sample block. I wonder how you could distinguish a sample block, because wouldn't it be fun to have some sample blocks? Would love to frame some sample blocks. I'm going to stop saying sample blocks, but it's just another interesting piece of history. I'd love to research that. So Dresden Plate, and this being done in very different colors indeed, right? This is really bright 40s, 50s colors, some contemporary fabrics in there, very different. And I'm not a big fan of polka dot, but it is charming, isn't it? It is super charming. I think I would like, oh, by the way, this is Broad Bent Quilt Shop. Broad Bent Quilt Shop. I love the way that the center is the negative of the background. I think that's very clever. And I like that it's dark. I wouldn't like it if it had white in the center. It'd be too like matchy-matchy. But this to me is a bit more subtle. Very clever Dresden Plate breakdown. This is Quilt with Kate. Quilt with Kate, and this is an Etsy shop. I absolutely love this block. I love that it's a rainbow, right? And I love that it is being used for a cameo piece in the center of this little bear. This is probably from, we were talking at the beginning of the episode about collections of quilt fabric. We were talking about, you know, when a hot quilt designer comes out with a new line, right? Oh, coming soon. And let's say, I don't know what this line is called, but let's say it's called Summer Camp, right? And maybe these pieces go together. I don't mean the colored pieces, but I mean the background with the little tree houses and the little teepees and the bunting and all that, the sign for the lake. Maybe that's the same quilt textile line as the bear, right? And then that all makes sense, doesn't it? Carol says 1/4 of the plate becomes grandmother's fan. Fantastic. Thank you, Carol. 1/4 of the plate becomes grandmother's fan. So we have 4 grandmother's fans here, or 1 Dresden Plate. That's great info. Bear in the woods. So it's so cute, isn't it? It's so cute. And I love that it feels like a color wheel. I love that there's such a huge storytelling element to this block. Right, when you look at the picture that's around the edge, it has a great sketchbook quality. but then the bear in the middle, he doesn't look like a very intimidating bear, does he? I mean, he looks like he's pretty benign. Wouldn't be too scared seeing this character come into the camp. I mean, I wouldn't stay seated, but nonetheless, it's just knowing it's an applique block and the colors were done the way that they're done, right? The colors are done like this, and then it was just sewn on as the circle, and then the center piece was sewn on probably last. So charming and a great idea. A really great idea. Another great idea from another Etsy store called Persimmon Dreams. And I just want to point out, if you're trying to find this store, Persimmon is being spelled with one M. So Persi, like Per Simon Dreams. Maybe it is Per Simon Dreams. Etsy shop. Now, this is an interesting dreamy bear. Oh, I love that. I love that he was a little sweetie Petey. This is so interesting because we're still talking about a Dresden square, but you can see there's a different kind of storytelling happening here. This artist, Persimmon or Per Simon, has reimagined the idea of a Dresden plate and turned the edges different heights, right, different lengths, right, going around. It's not a sort of equilateral design, right? It's not symmetrical, but reimagined it as a little city or village center with all of these houses coming from the center point. I think this is really clever. Is this hard? This is probably really hard, but you know, it might be that the artist is fusing with double-sided interfacing the fabric for the windows and all those small pieces. And if that's the case, that seems more bearable. How would you do that if you were fusing tiny pieces? If I was fusing tiny pieces, right, if I was fusing a bunch of this, like for example, a pink print, I would just cut a small square of the pink print, attach it to my interfacing, right? You'd have to do the double-sided that one side peels off, then the other side peels off. No, you wouldn't. Yes, you would, because what I would do is I'd cut a piece first, like a bigger piece that I needed, have it fused to itself, and then cut out the tiny square windows, and then I'd want to fuse those on, right? Or glue them, or whatever. Maybe glue them and then put a stitch over them. I saw an X over some of these windows. That would work as well. Is this a more fiddly variation? Oh yeah, but it's probably doable, and looks like it works great. Looks like they're doing some machine quilting on this, and we don't know the size of it either, so it could be that it's not as fiddly as we think. This example is from a blog I quite liked called, it's a WordPress blog called Quilt Happy, and she talks about, it's a young girl who did it, I don't know when it was done, but she talks about quilting making her happy, right? She's trying to get happy, actively get happy, and quilting helps her get there. So it's an inspiring blog in that regard. There's a lot of machine quilting happening here, but again, these are appliqued pieces of Dresden blocks, and I'm going to show you the larger piece of what she's working on. This is not an insert, right? This is not an insert. This is a piece of the quilt, because her whole quilt, and it's not done in the picture. She's showing us pieces of it. It's showing different Dresden blocks in various stages of completion, and she's really experimenting with quilting settings on the machine to quilt the plates, right? They're different each time, so it's not just slightly different colors, a different shape to the block, some complete, some 3/4 of a pizza full, some 3/4 of a grandma's fan, but she's also playing with the stitching on the machine, so it becomes a sampler in many ways. Do reverse applique for windows. Do reverse applique for windows. Okay, Carol, talk me through it in your words. Do reverse applique for windows. Reverse applique. So are you saying the main motif, for example, the building, cut that out, and then the window just falls behind it, so that you're fusing it or sewing it on, and the window is behind because the window is a cutout negative? I know I'm going to get it in the end. I'm tired too. I'm so tired. Oh, that dog sleeping against my legs. That's not happening tonight because I have to teach tomorrow. I can't have another night like that, I'll tell you. Dresden plate in a more traditional form, but still really, really exciting. This is Mary C, or MarYse makes. Mary C makes. maybe Maurice makes. In any case, beautiful, large Dresden Plate blocks with black centers, but you see how they are applied to a quilt blocks that are four blocks, four patch blocks, in different sort of homespun plaids, right? Interesting, because the patterns are rather ornate, right? These are very filigree, colorful, very detailed William Morrissey type patterns that make up the Dresden Plate. And to the great contrast of this piece, and I think it's a great asset, they are being applied to homespuns and plaids and ticking type materials that are very plain, right? So there is great drama in the choices being made in this quilt. Carol says, put the fabric behind the windows hole, and turn under window's edge. Okay, I see what you mean. Okay, I see what you mean. Like a mola. Sorry. Sometimes it takes a few times, Carol. It's just my brain. It's my brain by Friday night. This is another cute site. It's called Raggedy Owl. Raggedy Owl. I think I made a typo. I think it's Raggedy Owl. Sorry about that. It must be Raggedy Owl. I added an S in there, but I'm sure that's my mistake. Very pretty colors, contemporary colors again, right? They have the soft look of like the 90s and early 2000s. And again, the idea of in the center, instead of doing polka dots or something solid, using a motif. And of course, you have to line up. You have to choose the cut, right? You have to choose the cut and see how it's going to sit, because you don't want just the butt end of the bird, right? In the cameo, that would be like, wah, wah. You want the bird, his little face and the whole deal. It's cool. It looks like a paint-by-number bird, doesn't it? Oh, it is a paint-by-number theme. Oh, I'm just getting that. Isn't that fun? Like a paint-by-number quilt fabric. That is so cool. Yeah, beautiful block. Now, quilters, tell me what's going on here, because this sure don't look applique. Oh, it is applique. Okay, I see. It's machine applique, isn't it? A tiny zigzag around the edge. Am I reading that right? And then some detailed quilting, right, going around the very edge. Yeah, I think I see a tiny white line of fine, fine, fine zigzag that's attaching this piece. Really lovely. And this is a standalone. This isn't part of a block, because we can see it's finished on the edges. Interesting. Interesting colors, right? Interesting colors. Again, Raggedy Owl. I love this combination. I'm just studying it because there's some kind of very pop art prints, like the ovals and the polka dots. And then there's a sort of calico feeling thing, and the little mushrooms, the small scale. And then the wood grain is interesting. Very unusual. I bet that this is one of these collections of fabrics. That is something fun that quilters have that we really don't have. We have it as color sets, but combinations of fabrics that do the storytelling for you, like paint by number, right? So cute. So cute. Okay, so let's see what we've got next. Okay, a couple more. This is an artist called Jen Hader, and that's Jen with a G, so G-E-N, Hader, H-A-A-D-E-R. This is a variation, right? So this is, Judy told us, Judy, you said it right. This is, the quarter block is called Grandmother's Fan. But you can imagine if it went all the way around, we'd be looking at a Dresden Plate. When it doesn't go all the way around, we're looking at, this looks like a 70s or 80s era quilt, but we're looking at an artist who's playing with the grandma's fan, right? So it's the 1/4, but putting them together in configurations that in appliquing butterfly bodies, so they look like butterfly wings. So interesting, yet another thing that you can do with this block. It is interesting, isn't it? I feel like for me this quilt would need to be a little bit bigger, because I'm so distracted by the cutout square on the top northwest, where all the antennae come together. It seems like there's so much white in that block. My eye keeps going to that block. If it was bigger, right, that wouldn't be so noticeable, because it would occur more than once. You know what I mean? I'd be tempted to tip that quilt and put something into the center of that block, like my initials or the year or something like that. Kirsten, great to see you. Welcome back, my love, my good friend. Now, this quilt is done by thimblesandneedles.au, Gail. This comes from Australia. Thimblesandneedles.au. So this has something in common with a Dresden plate. You can see it is a different pattern. It is a complicated pattern. This is a pieced pattern. We are not looking at an applique get out of jail free card here. We're almost looking at a north, south, east, west pinwheel with a square in the background, right? That's part of what we're looking at. You can see that this pattern has some additional complexity because when you look at each of the pie slices, you see there is like the kite, and then it's got the two little triangles, and then it goes to the termination fabric, right? The one that ends at the edge. So different each time, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So each pie slice is 4 pieces, which doesn't make it impossible or even particularly hard, but something to think about because it looks like a Dresden plate, but it is a pieced quilt. And you can imagine all the color possibilities with this as well, right? So lots of ways to get to the same point. This is a great slide. This is from a website called Fity, FITY.club. Just showing this is a collage, a composite of many kinds of Dresden plate designs. So small circle, big circle, pointy edges, rounder edges, more pieces, right? The one on the top northeast, lots of pieces. They're all Dresden plate patterns. They're all plays on Dresden plate. Northwest, look at that, double. Oh man. What's your favorite? I think my favorite are, I always have to pick out my favorite because I'm a child. The top middle and the top right are I think are my favorites. They're both so pretty color-wise. I like to see stuff like this. All of the choices laid out for you all at once. Here's another idea for a Dresden plate. Now these aren't all exactly Dresden plates. You can see some of them are. But since it's an applique block, traditionally, think about how you could use a block like this or how you could design for a rug with a shape like this, right? You can turn these into flowers. If you find them at the antique store and you're like, oh, look, this seller has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these Dresden plate blocks, and I don't know that I would ever want to piece them together to make a quilt. Well, do you feel like making a sort of a quilt of flowers, right? Just very impromptu, right? Not really very free flowing, not really symmetrical, just for fun. Super beautiful picture, lots of variety here. It's a great idea, simple border. Yeah, I just love this piece. I love the idea. I think I might see buttons in the middle. I might be wrong, but I feel like there might be buttons in the middle. Maybe I'm putting the buttons on with my eyes. Oh, I'm sorry. This was Bloom In Workshop, and it's a blog. Bloom In Workshop blog. I think this is might be my last Dresden. Dresden, I've got a lot of Dresdens because there's so much you can do with this block, right? And knowing it's an applique block and you don't have to resolve the negative area, you're just sewing it on, I think gives you wings, gives you lots of freedom to do any configuration you want. And I think that this piece is a great example of that because we're looking at something that looks like a collage. It's a fiber collage. I love the colors here. It's a absolutely contemporary piece, really unusual. And just the variety of the different sizes, the different scales, the different style of Dresdens, right? So interesting to see them all together. I'm a collector at heart, and I know a lot of you are too. And when you're a collector and you look at something like this, you think, oh, I like that one, and that one, and that one, and that. And you like to be presented with multiples of something all at once because that's who you are. That's what your eye likes to read. This really appeals to me for that reason. And all of the beautiful, very tidy quilting in the background, right? It's not like crazy flowery quilting. It's very geometric. It's very small scale. But the quilting in the background is absolutely superb. Okay, let's move on to our next block. Let's take a little sip. This is going to be a hard one, okay? So get ready for that. By the way, this image is from a website called Bridget Heitland, and Heitland is Heitland. Bridget Heitland. Is this quilt block called Crossroads, the King's Court, or Lincoln Platform? And I'm looking at the time, so I'm gonna keep going with commentary. You go ahead and guess. Love the coloring on this. Probably gonna stick for the rest of the episode to um, just describing the pattern itself. So the answer to this is Lincoln Platform. So in other words, so I will read what the National Park Service said of it. Deeply engaged in a bloody civil war, President Abraham Lincoln did not hesitate when Congress presented him with legislation that could energize a weary nation. When he signed the Homestead Act of 1862, President Lincoln sent a clear message that he believed the Union could and would endure and that it would prosper. As a result, 270 million acres of land owned by the federal government in 30 states was offered for homesteading, thus creating the westward movement, one of the largest migrations of people in our nation's history. The quilt patterns or blocks that are displayed in the Quilt Discovery Experience were in the quilts used by pioneer women as they traveled west and homesteaded the prairie. They also depicted other popular patterns used in 1862 and successive years until the Homestead Act was repealed. I feel like we've read this before, but we haven't done this block before. Was repealed in 1986. Okay, so that's just sort of an ad for that. I feel like they've cut and paste that commentary for this block as well. So Lincoln's platform sounds to me like it's describing the platform that would be assembled like makeshift in a field every time Lincoln spoke. That's what I assume we're referring to here, the Lincoln's platform. So this is not a very well-known pattern, but you can see it's a very simple pattern. And it has a lot of variety, a lot of potential. It's a historic pattern, right? So it has this sort of political symbolism to it, too. It refers to the Western movement. It references Lincoln himself. There's a lot of history built into this one simple block. So in this case, we're seeing prints that are like handwriting, almost like accounting books, diary journals, printed materials from newspapers, right? It's an interesting use of really beautiful, soft, almost seaside colors. And a lot of the prints that have text references. I think really unusual block. This is way more traditional and way more country. This is from a website called Punt de Patch, Puntde Patch, Patch. And same block, same exact block, right? You can see how it's done. Small square in the middle, 4 long rectangles, 4 surrounding blocks that are split into 2 triangles, and then a series of squares going all the way around, right? So rectangles made up of either 2 or 3 squares all the way around. So not a complicated block piecewise to piece together, but a different color palette can really give us a completely different vibe. A different color palette can, again, give us a completely different vibe, done in all blues, navies. You're still seeing those smaller blocks in the background, almost like static, right? This is such a sharp looking block when it's done like this. The first example we saw, the Bridget Heitland example, I thought was exceptional because it picked out elements of the block. This is more monochromatic, so this is Pinterest unattributed. This is really focused on color play and the repeat of the block, right? Somebody loves the design, they want the repeat. It's all about the repeat, right? This handling of color really demonstrates the prowess of the maker, right? It's perfectly done. It's very fine. It's very sharp. It's very detailed, but it doesn't have that color wow or that. It is proclaiming itself to be a nice old quilt pattern, and that is what it is, and it's done beautifully, expertly, but very different vibe than other examples. For example, here's another example. Now, this is a vintage quilt. This came up under a website called, it's a Instagram, not a website, Cindy's Antique Quilts on Instagram. This is only a piece of the quilt that we're seeing, but you can see it is this block done with heavy borders, unusual colors that, slate blue and that pumpkin orange, super unusual colors, particularly with the Depression era color palette, right? And it's a little bit mixed. It looks like some of it is like the Victorian, the darks, the browns, the blues, and all that hanging on. And then we're also seeing some of the ice cream colors of the early 20th century, the Depression era, and pieced together with unlikely. I love slate blue with pumpkin. That's one of my all-time favorite color combos, but so unexpected to see it on this quilt. I think it looks fabulous, but this quilt is a scrap quilt, like without a doubt. This is the opposite of this. This is the same block, Lincoln's platform. This is the exact opposite. So it looks completely different. This being a scrap quilt, the person was scrapping it up, trying to get each little square to go the mileage to get each block done. And your eye can see in some blocks where there isn't a lot of continuity because she must have run out of color of that print. But it still makes for an optically really appealing and like heartbreakingly sweet piece. I don't know. I didn't see a larger picture of this, and it does make me wonder because it seems like going down the middle are the most solid blocks, and I wonder if that's confusing to look at. Some of the other blocks are just more busy with busier prints, and my eye is seeing a line right down the center. I wonder if that is the case. Karen says it's apparently a variation of Churn Dash. Okay, I can see that with the strong corners and the four rectangle connects, right? But in this case, they're block corners, not triangle corners. That's a small difference. So I see what you mean. That's interesting, and brings us back to that discussion about how different does it have to be for it to be a different quilt square by name? How different does it have to be for the block to get its own name? And that's not a question I can answer, right? Because this is kind of it's a living thing. It's a work in progress. This is a really hard one as well. This is a not very well known at all pattern. This image is from the National Park Service. Do you think that this quilt block is called Nebraska Pinwheel, Dakota Dial, or Utah Windmill? I think I probably gave this away earlier by referencing the state already. But this is Nebraska Pinwheel. And the National Park Service says wheels represent movement. The pioneers depended on wheels to carry them across the plains. For the homesteaders, wheels were vital to their lives. They were the basis of their transportation. Wheels were used in sawmills and in grist mills where the grain was ground into flour or meal. In the early 1900s, windmills pumped water for livestock and made life on the homestead easier. Because of its importance to the homesteaders in everyday lives, the wheel was often a favorite quilt pattern. When the United States entered World War I in 1917, quilt making took on new significance. The government took all wool produced for commercial use and actively urged citizens to make quilts using the slogan, "Make quilts, save the blankets for our boys over there." That's a long slogan, isn't it? As a result, many utilitarian quilts for home use were made. These quilts soon earned the nickname of Liberty quilts. Interesting. So the Nebraska Pinwheel is not a very well-known design. And I have to say, I don't know why, because I find this incredibly appealing. It has that sort of playful movement, the pinwheel quality, right, or whirligig quality around it. But yes, in the middle, it does have this strong foundation of the blocks. And if you leave the center block open to match the background, it does look like a pinwheel, right? There's like two kinds of movement happening here. And the extra blocks in the center for just more color. It's a very unusual block. I like how much it fills the block. I like how much is going on. It's not complicated, but I like that there's so much going on and it fills the block up, right? It's the geometry of it is very pleasing to me. So this is a variation on it from the Whole Country Caboodle, which is a website, just showing, again, a computer-generated image of how this could be different. This is a different version because instead of having a checkerboard center, this has got a pinwheel center, so it's an extension of the pinwheel. So essentially, this version would have three forms of pinwheel or stars turning. Interesting, right? So the Nebraska Pinwheel, there are so many that are, we're moving into the home stretch now, there are so many that are little known, and their names are little known, that are so worth looking at again. And if you go down the rabbit hole over the weekend and look up some of the names of these blocks, And particularly if you're thinking about incorporating them into a rug project, or you're working on a quilt project or a needlepoint project or whatever you've got going, just the symbolism of these blocks. When we make our rugs or our quilts or whatever, we are doing our personal storytelling, our personal mythology, and being able to have a whole language um, already there for you. That's the quilt language of blocks. That's a real gift, to be able to say, well, I'm from Dakota, or I'm from Nebraska. I'd like to do something in my next rug with this design because it's part of my history. It's part of my storytelling. I'd like to tell a story in my piece. You've got a whole language there waiting for you. It's just a question of researching it and decoding it, right? Now, I want to close this episode by talking about some variations on the geese designs, the triangles, because we talked about this in some of the earlier episodes. This is going to take us to the end of our quilt segment. I was looking at the website called fieldguide2quilts.com. And I specifically was clicking on, it's a very easy site to use. It's very fun and apparently endless. Super informational, lots of history here too. So I looked at this block because I feel like we were talking about this exact block the other day. And I said, this must be called something. And remember, I took a photo of it and I Googled it and nothing came up. Well, this block is called Kite Tails. It is actually an official block. It is called Kite Tails. It is related to these blocks. These are all block names. Road to California, Stepping Stones, Kite Tails, that's this one, Wild Goose Chase, Crossroads. It's related to all of those. Along with 399 other blocks, Road to California was published, so not this one, but Road to California was published in 1897 with the Ladies Art Company catalog, right? So that's a big deal, often referred to as capital LAC. This was block number 234. So remember, this would be one of the patterns that was a dime, and you would get it, and hey, you're on your way to making kite tails. There are a lot of, let me read some more text here. I'm good for now. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you, though. There are a lot of Roads to California blocks, though, and we suggest that the block be called Kite Tails, one of the three names that columnist Nancy Page came up with in 1932. Stepping Stones in 1942, Kite Tails, Wild Goose Chase. So you can see there has been shifts in language over the years, starting way back when it sounds like in different publications, the thing could be called something different. Nancy calls it this, you call it this, I call it this. We kind of have a problem. It's a first world problem for sure, but we will have trouble communicating when you say you're never going to believe this new quilt I did. Wait till I show it to you, and I say, oh, you're never going to believe it, and it turns out to be the same block, right? We're going to be very confused. So I want to close the episode out looking at some of these configurations, because if you've been sketching along the way, hang on, looking, there he is. This is another one that is related, and this one is called, hold on. Ooh, Karen, are you still on that site? I think this one is called the Grandma Dexter. I think this one is called the Grandma Dexter. You can see it's quite similar to Kite Tails. This Grandma Dexter variation of the block Kite Tails, okay, was made from scrap fabrics, not surprising, given it was published during the Great Depression. Why, remember Great Depression 1929, why was it named, okay, so this gets confusing because now they're talking about a Jacob's Ladder block. And I wonder if that's a similar block or the same block. And again, I think we're hitting this pocket of conversation where it's like, is it the Grandma Dexter? Is it a variation on Kite Tails? Is it the Jacob's Ladder? It's basically the same pieces, right? But with one or two tiny changes. So in all of these, we are seeing, well, and this is what that last block would look like as a full quilt. In other words, pieced together. So on this site, for every block they show you, and again, it's like infinite, Field Guide to Quilts, it'll show you the block, and then it'll show you what it looks like when all the blocks are pieced together, because in theory, you could say to yourself, I don't want those big 4-block squares. Or maybe I want to put in some of my Halloween novelty fabric, like a scene in each one. Oh, that would be good, right? Maybe you're thinking, I want to break them down into 4 blocks. Maybe you want to break them down more. Maybe you want to applique like a circle or something inside of them, or applique something. I mean, anything. It could be anything, right? So it's really helpful to see the whole thing fleshed out. Um, the first one I showed you, actually, this is, I think, the kite tails. That's kite tails. And this is the Grandma Dexter with the change of the 4 triangle block in the center. So Carol says, look for the Dear Jane quilt. Great story in over 200 blocks. Oh, good Lord, I will. Thanks, Carol. I definitely will. Here's another one using triangles a little bit different, but you see that there's still the triangles are pointing outward this time. This one is called the Kansas Star. And it's sometimes called Toad in a Puddle, right? And I'm working on a Toad in the Puddle design, incidentally. So different regions, apparently, different people, different names, different reference points, different everything. So Kansas Star, Toad in a Puddle. Again, if anybody finds like a book that talks about the names of patterns conversationally and says like, this is both the sawtooth and the 8-pointed star, and here's why, I would love to know that book. I would love to have that book. Not just for clarity, but I embrace the chaos of the language here, looking at these different blocks and saying, okay, it does have more than one name, and you see there are not that many changes here. This is really not that different than the Grandma Dexter before it, except it doesn't have the 4 triangles in the center of the square, and the flying geese are pointing in different directions. So not a lot of changes, right? Very moderate changes. This one, oh shoot, I forgot to put what this one is called. Dang it. I don't know how I did that. I'm looking at my papers and I forgot to cut and paste that one. Shoot. All right. I'll have to skip by it because I just don't remember. I do love this one, though, I have to say, because, again, the great cameo opportunity in the center and the geese flying all around. I feel like we saw this one, but without the triangles in the corner, and I think that the geese were pushed to be flush to each corner, and there were gaps. Weren't there gaps on the northwest and the southeast? Remember the one I'm talking about? I think there were just gaps. So same block, but slightly different spacing. And we come up with something different. This is the same as the block we saw earlier. Now, what was that called? They're calling it here Dutchman's Puzzle. So I'm going to stick with that because the Dutchman's Puzzle is one of the earliest ones. We were talking about this at the beginning of the episode with 2 geese going each way, right? And this certainly has more than one name. Dutchman's Puzzle as a name goes back to 1897. So we're going to stick with that because that might be the OG, as the kids say, the original. And this has a wheel motion to it, right? So this block is another LAC, Ladies Art Company block that was published in 1897, appears differently below. So I'm going to show you another example of the same block. Its first publisher called it just Wheel. And then I guess it sounds like it got the name Dutchman's Puzzle and it stuck there. So this is a little bit different than this, right? Not entirely. We're talking about just the directions being different. So the placement of the geese are different, right? It's still the same exact idea, but the placement of the geese are different. This one is sometimes referred to as Dutchman's Wheel, or as Dutchman's Puzzle, or as swastika quilt, which is probably the least popular of the names. It's sometimes referred to as mosaic as well. That's what one of the notes I wrote says, sometimes referred to as mosaic. So it goes by all of those names. Carol says, since you did hand piecing, you would love Nancy, the owner of Yankee Cloth in Wallingford. I still haven't met her, Carol. She does all her quilting by hand. You know, we should make a date to go out there, maybe in like a month when things are a little bit quieter. I would love to go out there and do an episode there. It'd be fun to do that. It'd be fun to cover that store as one of the Magpie features of a brick and mortar store. It is a fiber store. That feature doesn't have to be wool. I would love to go out and spend some time out there. That would be super, super fun. just incidentally, the Ohio farmer first published this block in this block as opposed to the other one we saw, right? So the this one is referred to as Dutchman's Puzzle, right? This one is sometimes referred to as Dutchman's Puzzle, but also Dutchman's Wheel and Swastika and Mosaic. So this block was first published in 1894 by Ohio farmer. And you can see it's very, very close. It becomes a question of lights and darks, and where the emphasis and the placement goes, right, for each of the geese. And a couple more blocks. This is most commonly referred to as toad in the puddle. So we saw another one that is sometimes toad in the puddle. This is apparently the official toad in the puddle since 1897. And the Ladies Art Company nailed this one down by publishing it as pattern number 150 in 1897. So again, the variation of name sounds like it often has to do with color placement. For example, there is an alternative name for this block, and it is Jack in the Pulpit. So you can, it would be a different emphasis of the colors, but apparently the same block configuration. Oh, does she, Carol? Does she have Naomi's kits? Oh, that's great. I know Naomi has talked about her in a very favorable way. She always says very nice things about the woman at, what was her name? Nancy at the quilt store. Yeah, we should definitely have a day out and go there. This is the last one I'm going to show for tonight. This is another LAC Ladies Art Company pattern. Came out in 1897 in their catalog. This is Oddfellows. So this is pattern number 269. It is a variation still on flying geese, but different again. Does it look like others we've already seen? Yes. But is it different? Yes, it's still different. Right? The color placement, the emphasis is different. The blocks are not different. If you're going to do these pieces, these traditional blocks, as traditional blocks, where the point of the exercise is to have the colors stand out and have the motifs stand out, then they're going to come out like the traditional block, and you're going to know that this is Oddfellow and not Toad in the Puddle. But if you make them up, and there is no right or wrong way, if you make them up as scrap quilts and your color placement is all over the place, it will become very hard by definition to say, this is Oddfellows, this is Wild Goose Chase, this is Dutchman's Puzzle. It will become hard because the thing that's distinguishing them is the dark versus the light, the color placement. So you know where the emphasis goes. Does it go on the goose or does it go on the pinwheel? Does it go on the square? Does it go on the corners, right? And your eye only knows that if it's clear. And with traditional quilts like the square that we saw of, maybe it was the Nebraska one or the one before it, I can't remember, but when you see them done in a very traditional way, they look like more sort of old-fashioned quilts, but they're making the block itself the whole story. It's not about piecing it together. It's not about emphasizing its uniqueness as a scrap quilt. It's not about using up your pieces. It's about showing that quilt block in its original form. So quilters, just like, to sum it up, quilters just like rug hookers, we do a lot of the same things. So we sometimes work in the way that's traditional, right, the original sort of old-fashioned way. We work in that way to make something look older, make a replica of something, as opposed to making something that's new, different materials, different techniques, variations, really challenging the aesthetic, challenging the norm, challenging the historic look. Quilters do exactly the same thing, fooling around with color, fooling around with different prints, with contemporary textile designers and the sort of fashionable color lines that are coming out all the time. Quilters are experimenting in the exact same way, and they are taking pieces that could be scrap quilts and scrap block designs, just as we do as rug hookers, and turning them into either keeping them that way and emphasizing that angle, or doing them in the polar opposite way and saying, here's Lincoln's platform. You recognize it? So it's fun. It's fun that the language is there. That's one thing that I really wanted to bring out in these episodes. The great designs, the traditional designs, the copyright-free designs, right? So many of these date back to the 19th century, early 20th century. Everything before 1930 right now is copyright-free. quilt blocks kind of transcend that anyway because they're meant as patterns, right? They're not meant to say, with the exception of contemporary quilt designers, right? Their quilt designs obviously are locked down under copyright. That is their art. But traditional blocks are old. And you can go back to the language, you can go back to the symbolism, you can get a hold of a book or look online, go down the rabbit hole big time, and look for quilt blocks that relate to you, your life, your stories, your family, your location. You will find a ton of quilt blocks that refer. In fact, remember that puzzle that I did? That this was the inspiration for the murder mystery puzzle I did last Christmas with Mandy. It was one I did the Christmas before with my sister, and it was one of these murder mystery puzzles where you read the story and then you make the puzzle, and you should have enough sense by looking at the puzzle to solve. Man, we barely had enough sense to solve that mystery. It took a lot of brain power and a lot of people. But the mystery was about this woman who, and I don't know what the name of it is, but if you look up murder mystery puzzle and put in the word quilt, you will see it. It was set in like a country house in the middle of nowhere. The woman was, she knew she was going to die. She made a will. No, she didn't make a will. The will was hiding somewhere. And the first person to find it would get everything. And she put a cipher together. She was a quilter. She put a cipher together that explained the will or the location of the will by piecing together quilt blocks that made phrases, right? So there was like a decoder in the mystery box, so you didn't have to know hundreds of quilt blocks and be able to figure it out. It told you once you sort of got going. You were allowed to see if you were on the right track, but you put the quilt blocks together in the puzzle and you put them in the right order, and it actually formed sentences or at least phrases, and it was like, okay, I'm not going to say it because I remember where the will was hidden. But it was an interesting use of quilt blocks, and again, just the example that for whatever project you're working on, it is an interesting thing to go back to those quilt blocks with all of their embedded secret language and all of that great symbolism that refers to all of us, right? There's a block there for all of us. Everybody, have a happy weekend. I hope I will see some of you tomorrow in the design class at Madison Wool in Madison, Connecticut. I will be there. And otherwise, I'll have to see about Monday. I might have to reschedule Monday because we're putting our house on the market on Monday, and they're coming in to take photographs. So I probably won't be able to do a Monday show because I think it's going to be chaotic and stressful. And I don't know how I'm ever going to get all this done with everything that's in front of me, but I will. I always do. So happy weekend, everybody. I will do a show either Tuesday after Kirsten's hook along, hook in, or on Wednesday. I'll have to see how it goes and what the realtor has for me on the plate. But I will definitely do a daytime show next. Oh, wait a minute. Next week is 4th of July. Okay. So I will do a daytime show next week. I'll just have to figure out when, because I won't be running a night show. I won't be running cocktail on Friday night because it will be the 4th of July. And I hope we'll all be watching fireworks. I can hear them in the sky. I hope it wasn't interrupting the show, but I can hear the town ones are in the sky. I'm holding out for the Vermont ones because we're heading up to Vermont this week. Have a happy few days and be looking out both on YouTube. If you're a subscriber, you'll get a message when I am able to schedule another show before I go away to Vermont for the 4th of July. So in the meantime, happy weekend, everybody. It was great talking about quilts with you. I'm going to move away from the subject and move back to mainstream rug hooking with next week's show. But in the meantime, have a great weekend. Hopefully see you tomorrow. Otherwise, I will certainly see you soon. Take care, everybody. Until